Okay, well, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Rosie Marie Ford, and I'm a native Alexandrian. I grew up in the 700 block of Patrick Street, which was considered, they call it Uptown. So I have a lot of memories of Alexandria. Like I said, I started at Miss Murray Penn, her kindergarten school, which was located in the 600 block of Columbus Street. And I think everybody went to Miss Penn's nursery school and kindergarten. So from there, we left from there. Then it was to Charles Houston. And I went to Charles Houston School from the first through the sixth grade. And I had the pleasure of remembering so many of the teachers there. So it's like when you was growing up in the neighborhood. So when you misbehave in school, anybody's parents could correct you. I grew up at Charles Houston, so when you misbehave in school, you got a paddle in the school from the teachers. You got one when you got home, and like I said, if your neighbor saw you doing something, got a switching then. So that was kind of fun, but a lot of fond memories of Charles Houston, and my most memorable was when I was got to be in the band. So Mr. Cortelia Payne, he was the band director, and he started me in my music career. So I started in the fourth grade. From the fourth grade all the way through high school, was into music. So he started me with the clarinet, and then I migrated to the bass clarinet, contrabass clarinet, saxophone, a little bit of piano. I played alto and tenor sax. So a lot of fun memories with the band. But I'm going to tell you about Charles Houston first. So Charles Houston was at school. As a matter of fact, when I was going there, we didn't have many white kids going there. So all the white kids had to go down to Prince Street. It was a school, Prince Street School. They had a march down there. So we had one white family in the neighborhood. And at the time, I didn't understand how things worked. And I would always ask, well, why they can't go to school at Charles Houston? And I grew up with the Massey family. So I, came home one day and they had moved. So they moved further down to Woodbridge or whatever. But we kept in touch over the years. So it was like back in the day, you always had the parents, you had children of your own age to play with. So I came from the Ford family. James T. Ford and Josephine Ford were my parents. Now, my father, he was very well known in Alexandria. They used to call him the cigar man and the key man because Daddy would have all these keys. And pretty much he fellowshipped at every church in Alexandria, but he was a member of Robert's Memorial Church. So anyway, my father coming up, he taught us a lot of things, and it's like work hard, work hard. So even though when he came up, he was in the CC camps, which was down here off of Union Street. All the blacks were housed down there in that part of Alexandria. So he grew up in the CC camps, and eventually he met my mother. He worked for the Department of Agriculture. Then he decided to start his own business. So he came up with Tip Top Custodial Service. And he also drove one of the first black cab drivers for All American Cab. So it was, you had these cab drivers that also looked out for everybody because we had Mr. Charity, um, remember Mr. Nelson Green, the funeral home director, he was involved in there. But they played a very important part in Alexandria because he was also a member. It was a little club, they used to call it the Secret Seven. So it was made up of, I would call it prominent businessmen of Alexandria. So anytime something happened, they would go march down City Hall, and next thing you know, everything was all right. Because at one time we couldn't go swimming in the swimming pools. We had to swim down there, right there here on the riverfront. So it was, I forgot the child's name that drowned over there, but they went down there and protested, and all of a sudden we were able to go to the swimming pools at Cameron Street, because at one time they wouldn't allow blacks up in there. So even so, and I didn't see black or white growing up because we was never taught that. So you judge a person by the character of the man. I have friends of many different races and stuff. So I didn't see the racial stuff, all that. All I knew is, well, this is like my neighbors, they were white, and I played with them coming up. So we wasn't taught to hate a person because of their color of the skin. So it's taught that you get along with everybody. And they taught us that in church as well. So like I said, growing up in Alexandria was a little bit different, but like I said, with the Secret Seven, and you had Dr. Carpenter, Reverend Boyd, uh, Deacon Charity. It was a lot of them in there. So I lived at the 702 North Patrick Street, and the barber shop on there was a barber shop on that corner. And every Friday night, these men would gather in there. And I thought my father was in the mafia because they would put these black coats on and these little top hats, and they would meet every Friday in there. So anytime something happened, we're gonna go take care of it. I don't know how they got things done, but they made everything right. And so I grew up with these guys, and like I said, even being at Charles Houston, and when they decided to change the school system around. So when I got out of sixth grade, my next destination was Parker Gray. Uh, it was a middle school then, so that's when they started this busing. So after I left Parker Gray, they decided, well, they came up with this K622 plan. So they made it was Parker Gray, Minnie Howard, and John Adams were your middle school. So they had the 7th and 8th graders, and GW and Hammond became the junior high. So they had the 9th and 10th graders, and then everybody got together at TC, the one high school, TC Williams. So I got bussed up to Minnie Howard, and that's when my life became purity. I ain't gonna say that word, but I mean, it was different because going to Minnie Howard, and the first thing they messed up when they put all the plaques that was in the band, and they put us back in beginning band. And I'm like, I'm a first chair student, so of course I had to go back and tell Mr. Payne. So what he did, he went up there, and him and Mr. Lewis and Miss Green, they went up there, and we had to audition for our seats, and I got my first chair back. But I didn't understand how the school system was working, because I started seeing a lot of changes. So from there, even in how they put us on teams. So I couldn't figure. I was on 8411. I remember that 8411. So, and I'm looking at the class, and I grew up with all these black kids and whatever in the neighborhood. But when I got to Minnie Howard, I was the only black kid in the class, and I'm like, well, what's wrong with this picture? Well, why I can't go over there? And they made us, the classes and stuff had to sit together, even for lunch and everything. And I just couldn't figure out why I'm the only one, and all my friends, they on the other teams and stuff. But I didn't realize it was based on your like test scores and stuff. So I was in the class with all these prominent, the white kids, and they were real brainy, and they had to get used to me, and I had to get used to them, because it was like, I'm not standing for the national anthem, so they would sing one and I would sing the other, and I stayed in trouble with Minnie Howard. But I started learning with these kids, and they started learning me. So even with the teachers, it was just a different atmosphere, and I became that one rebel side and stuff. But looking back now, so I'm on also do the class reunions for TC Williams. So and when we get together, and we getting ready for our 50th reunion. It's coming up next year, so we working on the class reunion for TC Williams, and we get together and we could tell the stories of individuals and how things happen. And one of my classmates, they said, well, you seem to know the blacks, the whites, the Asians and all that. And I used to tell them I'm just international. I hung with everybody. So, and that's how I became friends with a lot of them. And we still communicate to this day. But like I said, growing up in Alexandria, it was different. It was fun. We had a lot of adventures. I can remember when the floods came through Alexandria. So the river is a couple of blocks away from that 700 block of Patrick, but I remember the water coming up on our steps and everything, and we out there playing in the water. I wouldn't do that nowadays, but we actually had to get out. We had to get out there. It was just fun. So you seeing all this water for the first time. I remember when Martin Luther King, they marched through here. I was part of that. I was a little child, but they marched those wagon trains and stuff. They marched them right up Patrick Street, which was Route 1. It was Route 1 back then, but I know they parked in front of our houses. I remember Mom making sandwiches for the people, and they had wagons and everything. And I didn't understand then, but I remember my father taking me over to the March on Washington and seeing Martin Luther King, and I just couldn't. I was just amazed at seeing all these people of color and everybody, and they was just on the waterfront, and I'm like, it was different. So I can reflect back to that moment, because I tell people I was a part of the civil rights. And I don't care what they say. just seeing it coming down the street. And, back then I wish we could have had pictures, but we didn't invest in cameras and stuff like that. So you're not going to see a lot of the history of Alexandria. And like I said, going up through TC, we did a lot of things. So by being in the band, I got a lot of opportunities. And I also was in the band, um, marching band, and called myself joining a little outing club at Parker Gray School. So Mr. McCrae and Miss Steese, they were the guidance counselors. So they would take us camping and all these other places. So we got to experience that. I remember Assateague Island, they took us over there and we camped on the beach for the weekend. We have been to, it was a cabin up there. It was up in the Blue Ridge. It's called Mountaintop. And as a matter of fact, I still communicate with some of the classmates, and they always bring up these stories of when we went out in the mountains and getting lost in the woods, and the guidance counselor scolding us and stuff. So, I look at all these. It's a lot of people that have they gone there. It's like you going to Alexandria, and people say, I'm Alexandria. I said, but you're not a native Alexandria. So if you didn't graduate from TC or GW or Parker Gray, you're not native Alexandria. They could move in the city, but they can't move us out. So Alexandria has changed. It's not the charming community that we grew up with. And I could tell you now where a lot of people used to live in houses and stuff, and it's like you would call out certain house numbers, the Taylor family, the Napper family. They say 406 North Ave. That was Erg Napper's house. And it's just different numbers. Like I said, now the barber shop, and it was a lot of communications in that barber shop, and they would get together and they talked about everything. We had the black churches, and back then, like at Charles Houston, the first day of May. And if you're not a native Alexandria, you call first day of May, they say May Day, and people would know what you were talking about, because that was a day of celebrating. We celebrate spring. So during May Day at Charles Houston, all the classes had to perform a skit, and the band had to get out there. We marched around the neighborhood, and all the parents would get together. They bring the picnic baskets, and they picnic out there, and it was an all-day festival and stuff. And it was just beautiful. You don't see that now. They wouldn't do that now because the way the kids are today, they couldn't pull it off. But being in the George Washington Parade, always been in the George Washington Parade. Now we say, man, this is a long parade, and they would line us up all the way down Green Street up by Jones Point, and we march all the way. And the parade used to run all the way down Washington Street. So now they kind of changed parade route. But that was a lot of memories I have with that. And even so now, just reminiscing, and I helped clean the cemeteries and with the Douglas Cemetery, with Freeman Cemetery. You go through there and you just seeing all these grave sites, and you remembering all these people. And I said, boy, it's a lot of people going to Alexandria. Like I said, even growing up and learning about different things, I could take you to, if I had to draw you a street map of the school, how the streets, how Alexandria used to be, and what happened. I can tell you, we shopped downtown Alexandria. Murphy's was right there on the corner. We had G.C. Murphy's. Everybody went to Murphy's. You know where you getting your stuff from. You go down Murphy's. You had J.C. Penney's. The stores had changed. You had Cannon Fuel Company. Everybody had we grew up with what was that, kerosene heaters and stuff in the house. That's what we had. And we never had air conditioning coming up. That was like that was a luxury. I grew up with fans and stuff like this. So now they cut the air conditioning on. I say it don't bother me if I have an air conditioner now, because that's how we grew up. We didn't have air conditioning and all this fancy stuff. I said all the neighborhoods, you had your neighborhood dogs and stuff, and even learning everybody's pet. You can call out that pet going past that person's house. I know I'm on the family with, I don't know if you know Michael Johnson. He's one of the actors for City, and all of us grew up together. So Michael Johnson, they had their dog Bullet. We had Mickey, and it's just the Massey's. They had Frisky, and you know all these neighborhood dogs and their pets, and Alexandria was real friendly. We didn't have all this violence like they have in the school today. You respect that person, and it's amazing because doing an interview in this library, and the library was actually my second home. So Miss Davis, Gladys Davis, she was the librarian here, and she was here for probably 50 plus years. And I grew up with her niece. So Sandra Penn was Miss Penn's daughter. Miss Penn was the first black kindergarten teacher I was telling you about earlier. So we ran this library, and after school we over here at the library. They would have to run us out. So my father would always come looking for me. He said, I can always find you. You always in the library. You just stay in the library. But my goal was to read every book up in here. Didn't finish, still working on that, but it was just like, come in here, read a book, played around. We stayed in here so much they gave us job putting the books and stuff up. And that's, that was a fun memory. But then another thing we did as a child growing up, we played games. We didn't have all these fancy toys. You had to create your own toys. Now, we used to go up to Masonic Temple, and we couldn't afford the regular slides or whatever, so we went down that hill on trash can tops, cardboard boxes. So, when it snowed, everybody going to Masonic Temple. We was on top of that hill, and they had a memorial up there because they put a bench up there for Martin Luther King. And I was standing up on steps, and this been, I think, last year. I was standing up on the steps, and I was telling people what we used to do. And they like, you went down what hill? I said, man, we used to put the slide on down the hill on the trash can. They said, well, what about that? I said, when you hit the bottom, you would go up in the air and you laying down. And they couldn't believe it. I said, but that's what we did as children coming up. So, and we played the double dutch and all that. So kids today, they don't play games outside. So today, all the kids are on laptops and everything. And I'm like, because even I had to break my nephew and niece off the laptop. I said, go outside and play. They like, and do what? Kids, they just stand out there in the yard. They don't know how to get out there and play. I mean, we played with anything because some of the little animals, we used to go over, it was a creek in back of, it was a store called Santula's down here on Dew Street. So it was a creek in back of there. And we would get the turtles, they get crayfish out of there, and the things that I played with today, I wouldn't pick it up today, but I'm like, man, you used to do some crazy things. I used to tell people that we invented bungee jumping because Charles Houston had the flagpole, and I remember some of Michael Johnson's brother Andre. So they would tie the ropes up and pull us up the flagpole and let us down. So that's some of the crazy stuff we did as children. You couldn't get away with that today. They would say that's child abuse and stuff. But, I mean, it's just the things we did in the neighborhood. We had the races, jumping over sticks. And some of us crazy kids, they would play this game. Don't do it today. Don't do it today. So we would lay out in the street and wait till the car, see the car come. Then we jump up and out the way real quick and stuff. And we did just crazy things, and even learning how to drive in Alexandria. And I had the privilege of my father teaching me, but going to driver's ed was another adventure for the kids because we had driver's ed at Hammond High School, and it was funny, they had the figure 8 on the lot, so you had to be able to go around the figure 8 and come out that path at Hammond. And they would pile a whole bunch of kids in the cars, and everybody had their chance driving. We knocked over many. Mr. Futrell, Mr. Lee was my teacher, and it was the corner of King Street and Seminary Road. It was that big yield sign, and I remember the girl hitting it and knocking it over, and he was just shaking his head. He said, "You'll never get off the lot," and he made her stay on the figure 8. And I see some of my girlfriends now. I said, I call them figure 8 because they never got off the lot. So you had to be good to get off that parking lot and everything. But like I said, the thing I probably did like the most was getting bused to school because, they had all these inner city kids and they only had 4 buses to take us up to Minnie Howard and all that. So the first stop, it used to be it's a McDonald's there on Henry Street now, but it used to be called Geno's. So that was the first stop. So if you wasn't up there, they had the first stop Geno's, and then we had a Heinz store down here off of King Street, and it was right by the Reed Theater. So all the kids would try to make it up there to Geno's, and we boarded the buses. So we had to, a lot of us had to stand. It was 3 or 4 people on the seat. They wouldn't do that nowadays. They put 2 seat, the city school buses now, but they were actually buses up there to Minnie Howard. And a lot of times we never made it up there on the bus because the bus driver would get mad and kick us off at the Masonic Temple. A lot of times that it was just so many kids on the bus. Just get off. We started acting because it's our first time we riding the bus, and we acting up on the bus, of course. And the bus drivers would get tired and they kick us off. So the parents, even in the afternoon, coming from Minnie Howard, we would get kicked off and be up at Bradley Shopping Center. So a lot of parents had to get together and go down there with the school board. And I remember my mother, because the buses pull up, so the parents looking for the kids, and the buses are empty. And I remember my mother and Miss Johnson and a few of the other mothers got together, and they went down to the school board, and they stopped dropping us off. They didn't care what happened. You called the police or whatever, but you would not drop these kids off all over the city. And then walking from Minnie Howard a lot, from Patrick Street up there. I said, sometimes we had to run because we're trying to get to school on time or whatever. But that was a long walk, and but it was fun because you talking about 30, 40 kids, 50. Sometimes it looked like 100 of us just walking to school. But a lot of good memories. We had a lot of teachers. So some of the famous teachers, I bet, native Alexandria. Now Miss Green, the music teacher, and everybody remembers Miss Helen Day. Miss Day was very prominent in the city. Her husband was Ferdinand Day, but Miss Day was one of those teachers that it was so quiet in her class, because if you misbehaved, Miss Day would take it out. And she had these paddles in her class shaped like hands, so everybody had a paddle. So you misbehaved, she would line us up on these chairs. You go home and she tell you learn your multiplication tables. You better know when you come back the next day, because she will stand you up there and you go from one to 9. I remember getting up there stuttering, and I had to just blurt it out. And she said, "Oh, you okay? I see you've been studying." And she believed in that discipline and believed in the book. So she give you something, you had to get it done. So, like I said, the first time Miss Day had my older sister, Pam, and she had my older brother, Frazier, and unfortunately, she ended up getting me too. And I'm like, I got Miss Day, and I bust out crying. Why? I was like, why? What did I do? Because I always heard these stories about her